Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Todd Bales, and I'm the QAPC, the Quality Assurance Program Coordinator here at AMIC DET2 in San Antonio, Texas. Obviously, we're unable to do classes in person, so I thought I would try this method to get some information out to you as the Corps who work on our various programs, and maybe just give you some refresher training. Obviously, you know that you have refresher training which is due every 3 years, and whether it's 8 units or 16 units, you need to complete that and show that you've done that additional work so that you can maintain your status as being a Corps in good standing. What I'm going to try to do with this program is give you just a short segment, a short bite, if you will, of a topic. It won't be exhaustive by any means. It'll just be something that's just maybe for you to chew on a little bit, and then the way we're going to work this, I'm going to give you 3 words during the course of what's going to happen in this class time, and in that, I'll give you these 3 words, one probably at the beginning, one in the middle, one at the end, and then you'll just send me an email which says, Todd, I listened to your course and I can give you a half a unit, because I'm going to try to keep these courses under 30 minutes. I have a timer going right next to me now, so for those who know me, I can talk, so I'm going to try to keep it under 30 so that you can get in and out and get your credit and then move on. So today's topic is going to be market research, and it's something near and dear to my heart. I've seen a lot of good market research and some rather poor market research from Corps, who are usually tasked with pulling together the market research for the contracting officer. And so today I just want to talk about some highlights, some things that you need to consider, and this is by no means exhaustive. This is just kind of scratching the surface, but hopefully it'll get you thinking about some really good things. So the first of the 3 words is going to be big. So go ahead and write that down so that you can respond back to me and say that you watched this video. And then once I do send you back the certificate, I should let you know, please go ahead and upload that into PyJam in your training, and then I'll note that you've done some continuing training, and I can credit that towards your ongoing training. So, market research. What is market research? Well, there's a classic definition. It says market research means collecting and analyzing information about capabilities within the market to satisfy an agency need. You're collecting and analyzing information about companies out there that can do either a service for you, provide some service, or they can provide a good. They can provide a part to a larger system, perhaps, a part for a computer. You're trying to figure out who out there can do it. Okay. Now, with market research, you're not necessarily deciding who's going to get it. That's going to be done in a service acquisition with your MFT group and your contracting officer, your PM. You're going to talk about the various different options that you've discovered in market research, and then make a reasoned decision about the direction that you need to go. And that goes into another document which says what your acquisition strategy is going to be. So market research becomes a real foundation for what that is. So what isn't market research? And so I was a brand new contracting officer back at the Presidio of Monterey, and one of my contemporaries who wasn't a contracting officer quite yet brought me a piece of paper, a couple pieces of paper, and said, Todd, hey, you're the contracting officer, could you look at this and tell me what you think? And I said, sure, what is it? And he says, market research, and he handed it to me, and literally at the top of the page it said, we should go with company XYZ. That was like the opening line to his market research. And then he went down and said, about halfway through this 2-page paper, he basically said, well, I'm not really going to do any research for this because this is the only firm that can do this. And then his final conclusion was, well, we have to go with my recommendation. We have to go with company XYZ because they're the only ones that could do it. Well, I looked at that and I gave the paper back to him and said, you need to go back and do some research here. You need to tell me why that this guy or this company rather is going to be acceptable for what you're trying to do. It's true, they may have been the vendor for the last 20 years, and that's great. That's great information to know as you put into your market research. In the very first, it says, what's the background of this acquisition? Well, if you know it as the core, put it down. We have been with this company for the past 20 years. But I'll tell you, being with the company for the past 20 years does not make a good argument. It's one argument, but it's not the entire argument to go ahead and go with that firm in the future. Think about it. If I was in 1890s America and I was working for let's say the United States Army, and I was looking for ways to move cannons from place to place, I might source a horse and a wagon. Well, and let's say that was the market research and that was what was available in the marketplace, and I would have bought a horse and a carriage to take cannons from point A to point B. Well, now we're in the 1915, 1916 World War I time period, and I'd also sourced, I need to come back and move a cannon from point A to point B. What if I would have used that same market research and just forwarded it from, the 1890s to the present and said, yes, government, you need to, here's all the sources of people who can provide us horses and carriages to move. Well, of course, we all know by that time we had mechanized vehicles, and we would have missed that whole genre to move those cannons from point A to point B. So market research obviously has to be something current. So market research isn't stating just what you have now. While that's an important part, that is not necessarily the answer. The second question I would just put before the group right now is, who's responsible for market research? And I got to tell you, for the first couple years of my contracting life, I thought it was the responsibility of a contract specialist. It seemed like I was always the one who was writing the market research paper from our mission partner, and they may have given me a couple scratches here and there, and I tried to pull something together. I did some research, and I came up with the market research. The correct answer here in the Air Force, for sure, is that we're all responsible for market research. We all have insights. We all have people out there, companies that we know that can perhaps make this happen. And so market research is the responsibility of everyone. But I will say the Corps probably is the closest person to knowing the good or service that the government is seeking. So it really is in the government's best interest to have the Corps be able to do sufficient market research and jump in there. Because, if you tell me you need part ABC, and I see this a lot in systems, computer systems, we need to have this graphics card, and we need to have this accelerator and this chip and all these different things. I frankly don't know what that chip is. I'm a contracting officer. I depend on you as the Corps to tell me what that is. And so when you go out into the marketplace and you do some research, you can say, yes, this is an equivalent chip. This is an equivalent accelerator. This is going to be a like service for being able to move ahead. So you as the contracting officer's representative really are the ones, the front line, the cutting edge of being able to pull that market research together. And then you in association with your contracting officer will get together and actually formalize that so that the MFT, the multifunctional team, if we're in a service environment, can look at it and maybe ask any questions. I will tell you right now, it's really important that you have sufficient market research, because that leads into the paper, which is going to be sent to your small business professional. And your small business professional basically has to sell your idea up to the SBA. If you've done a shoddy work of market research and you haven't looked at any small businesses who could perhaps meet the need of your requirement, the Small Business Association administration is going to come back and they're going to look at that and say, you didn't do sufficient market research. There's all kinds of 8A companies who could do this work, and why aren't they listed on the form? So with that said, I'm just going to encourage you to be as comprehensive as you can in your market research. It will save everyone some time, and it will actually help your requirements package get through the process that much quicker. Now, You may list on your market research a firm that you don't think we will ever go to. Perhaps they're too big. Perhaps they're a foreign national. Perhaps they're from Mexico or Canada, as examples of foreign nationals. But perhaps we have some kind of trade agreement with them that allow them to do the work in our environment. And perhaps not. But we want to look at the whole universe of possibilities that of the companies that can either provide, like I say, the good or service for the company. So it's a group effort to do market research together, and I think that's what I want to kind of drive home. But the core is just key to making sure that we're on the right path. Now, if I could give a kind of a foot stomp here, my first contracting officer back in the Army told me, as I was trying to tackle this market research thing, and I was like, oh, what do I start? Where do I even start on this? His recommendation, which was quite good, was to go back to who did it last and find out, what NAICS code that they operated under, or what NAICS codes they operate under, so that we know at least the industry that's out there performing this type of service. Because between you and the contracting officer, once we know the NAICS code, the best NAICS code, we can do some searches online and come up with a whole bunch of companies that could perhaps do the service. Same thing with, so that would be a foot stomp. You want to go ahead and just look at who did it in the past. And perhaps no one has. And then we're starting from scratch. And then we can always go look at like a source like a GSA, and you type in what you're looking for. Cleaning hard drive heads. Let's say that was a service that we were looking for. Don't know if that's a thing, but let's just say that what it was. You could type that into your GSA search engine, and it would come back and perhaps give you some ideas about who would be out there. And from that point, you can start making some phone calls to figure out what's going on. So, with all those things said, let's talk about what's the required elements of market research. And this is all from FAR Part 10, extremely high level. I would encourage you to go back and take some time and look at FAR Part 10 and see what they're talking about. But the first thing they do talk about is you need to conduct market research appropriate to the circumstances. Obviously, if you have a $1,000 buy versus a $100,000 buy versus a $1 million buy, your market research is going to be different because obviously as the dollars get larger, probably the number of players, if it's a common service or even a common good, will get larger as well. So you want to make sure that you get everyone in that arena. Make sure it's appropriate. You're going to talk about the requirements as part of your market research. And again, we're contracting officers that are looking at the market research that initially comes in. People on the MFT, maybe multifunctional team, maybe from finance, or they may be from legal, or they may be from security. You need to do a good job of describing exactly what you're trying to purchase. Are you purchasing, it's a good, perhaps it's a little bit more obvious. If it's a service, we're probably going to have a PWS, which is going to describe exactly the services that you're looking for. Whether it's mowing grass or whether it's providing SCAWs to some location around the world. If we're doing a part buy, a product buy, it becomes really important to put into your requirement section whether this is the only thing that you can purchase, and it has to be this specific part. Or is it brand name or equal? So many times, and I mean just over and over and over again when I was purchasing products, I would see market research come in and say, well, we have to buy the IBM 123. And my question is, why do we have to buy the IBM 123? You need to be able to answer that question. Because I'll come back and say, well, is there something that's an equivalent to the IBM 123? Well, yeah, sure, it's the Xerox 324 is the same thing, Todd. That would work too. Okay, well, once we know that the requirement can be filled by the IBM 123 or the Xerox 345, now our pool of potential offers has expanded, and we need to list that in the market research. And we talk about things like that as being brand name or equal, and this isn't a brand name and equal class, but basically it says the government can substitute this for this. Now let me tell you, in your market research, it's really important. Perhaps you can't substitute the Xerox 345 for the IBM 123 part. You just need to tell the contracting officer, you need to tell the small business professional, you need to tell the SBA why only a certain part or service will work for you in that situation. And it could be a quite legitimate situation. It could be that there is an IT policy out there which says we're only going with IBM parts. If that's the case, that's perfectly legitimate. What we would ask as part of market research is that you actually attach that policy to your market research so that we can have that backup to prove that only that can be done. Perhaps training is going to be an issue if we change a certain vendor, and it's going to cost, you know, $10 million to change over to this new product or service, but the part's only $1,000. Well, that might be justification to stay with the same part. So just make sure that you know exactly what's the brand name or equal. If you're actually specifying parts, another important thing that we found over the years is people say, I need an IBM 123. Give us the version of what that is, because we may go out to someone and, you know, they only stock the IBM 123 from 1980, but we need the one from 2010. Make sure that any kind of pertinent information about what you need is included in that as well. So let's talk about techniques that are approved under FAR for conducting market research. And the first one I think is really important. I think it's something we forget. You as CORS uniquely know what's going on in your industry, or you probably should, or you will after doing your market research. FAR says you can contact knowledgeable individuals within the government and industry regarding capabilities. So if you have someone who in your shop knows this thing, knows this service, then that person can be used as market research. And you can actually say, I had a conversation with Todd Bales, and he knows about SCAs. And he said that there's, based on what he knows, there are 5 companies in the world who can provide individuals who have the proper certification for SCAs. And this is what he said they were. And that's a perfectly legitimate way to go ahead and start market research. Not the end all, but a good way to start it. The second way that the FAR lists is you can review the results of recent market research. And we do this all the time on the QAPC network. Someone will say, hey, has anyone done market research on this? HVAC repair. Okay. And maybe someone at Tinker has done that. Well, they'll send over their market research, and boy, that gives you a real nice leg up on doing your market research. So go ahead and check that out. Similar or identical is what the FAR says, and so we can typically find something that's similar or identical. Actually, I got a call just last week or 2 weeks ago about someone doing ISSS type services at another base, and they want to know how we had done what we did. They were doing market research. Okay. We can also, in conjunction with your contracting officer, publish a formal request for information. We put an RFI out there and we see what comes back. And then you as the Corps get a chance to look at that and evaluate whether this company that has responded has that part or service for you. And so that's something really important, and that goes into your market research. And again, you're going to go ahead and clip on the back of your market research, hey, we did an RFI and these were the results we got back. Give us a summary, give us what the results were so that we have that backup. The FAR actually gives us the opportunity to look at government databases to see whether those services are out there. And you can talk to your contracting officer for possible ways to search those as well. We can do that. The next several talk about just participating in government interactive online communications with industry. And so perhaps you are part of an industry group. You can use that information as well to go ahead and feed into your market research. They talk about lists, having lists that are published out there on websites. You know, I'm finding less and less lists on a website. They want you to call and talk to them to make sure you're getting the right thing. But GSA has contracts sitting out there, and they can give you a real good idea who's providing those types of services or can provide those goods. And perhaps that's your best source of lists that I know of. We're also talking about catalogs and other general available product literature. Perhaps you've gone to a trade show, picked up some things. That can become part of market research. And I would recommend as you go to trade shows in your business that you would accumulate those contacts and that information so that you can be ready for market research moving forward. Catalogs, I don't even know if catalogs are available anymore out there. I'm sure they are, but there's probably online catalogs, and your vendor can send you in that direction so you can see what they actually have. And then there's just a list of government websites out there that can help you as well. And for me, SBA has has several great databases that you can go into and query. You can say, show me all the companies with NAICS code 54321 in North Carolina, and it'll spit those out. It becomes a real good source that tells you, well, there's some small businesses, women-owned businesses. There's some different things that are there that you can use in your market research to kind of get a feel for what the market's all about. I will tell you, you do an SBA search and you turn it in, and let's say the SBA search says there's no women-owned businesses in the country that do this service that you're looking for. That's a compelling argument for the SBA not to ask you why you haven't gone to a women-owned business or a hub zone business, 8A business. They want to see what you got. Again, in market research, we're looking for, as contracting officers, we're looking for the opportunity to have competition, because competition is always the best way to get the best prices for the government. And so we're looking for groups that are likely to give us 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the number is of offers, so that we can actually work with them to get you, the mission partner, the best price. So we're looking for groups that are big enough to make that happen. If there's only one in a group, we're probably not going to go that way because we're not going to get competition. All right, and BetaSAM is one more area. It's a new website. It used to be called SAM, and they have some great information for you as well about companies out there. And you can do NAICS searches, and you can find out who's out there who does comparable sort of work, or at least a list of themselves doing comparable sort of work. So the next word, okay, for those who are writing down the word, dogs. Dogs is the second word, so write that down. All right, questions to answer. The first question you're going to ask yourself, is this a commercial or non-commercial item? If you have a good feel for that, put that down. And that's maybe one of those things you want to do a consultation with your contracting officer, but it's definitely something you need to understand. List the companies that can supply. And that's going to drive the rest of your market research, because if the company is commercial, then we're going to look at whether there's commercial terms and terms for service on that particular item, and we'll go for that. I'll tell you a story about that perhaps in a minute, about where we ran into a problem with that. Questions to answer: are the customary terms and conditions available in the marketplace? Okay, there we go. There's the second one. I knew it was there somewhere. And here, it's really, really important to know what those terms and conditions are. Several years back, again, I was working for the Army at the time, we put a contract out, and we had gone to a major university, and they came back and they could in fact do the service that we needed them to do, but they came back with exceptions to our solicitation. They had struck 4 or 5 of the federal clauses in the contract, and after discussion with our legal group, and they had said, well, we never sign these with the federal government. We're a state agency. We're never going to sign these federal ones. It was determined that we could not go with them because what they were proposing wasn't acceptable to us. But it was customary terms and conditions, and that would have been nice to know when we went into market research originally, about how the state university systems could or couldn't work with us. You're also going to need to look in your market research the impact of environmental, safety, and security considerations. And hopefully these are items you've received some kind of form from your contracting officer, and they have shown you need to address these issues. And for us in a more secure environment, security considerations are going to be huge. You're going to want to put down, you're going to have this security clearance to get in the building to work. So you want to make sure that that's called out in your market research up front, because that will take your pool from this, down to this very rapidly. So you need to make sure that you list exactly what they're going to need to get into the building and perform a service for sure. Again, questions you're going to ask, okay, so what are all the sources that are available out there to make this happen? Again, as contracting officers, let me speak for myself, as a contracting officer, I want to have options when I see that market research come in. I want to be able to pick from a group or groups of companies so that we get the best result. Okay, you want to make sure that they can do it. And with that, let's say you've listed 10 companies. I want to know what the size of those companies are and what their capabilities are. So list those in your market research. Be as extensive as possible. One thing, the next one that question answered that a lot of people don't consider is you need to think about what's the state of future market conditions that may imply. So, if we think that we're going into hyperinflation, you would probably have something different than if we thought the economy is going to go stagnant. You need to be able to answer those questions. If you think that we're going to be buying magnesium, I don't know why you want to buy magnesium, but let's say you want to buy magnesium, you're going to go ahead and look at it's going to be a supply that's going to be available for a while. Because let's say magnesium was going to be a scarce element that's going to disappear from the world market, and you know that in the next 6 months. That's going to drive how we write our contract. Because if we say period performance or delivery schedules, you need to deliver within 3 weeks of the order being placed. Well, if magnesium is going to be scarce, or there's a war in whatever country produces magnesium, that may impact that, and that'll impact the terms and conditions of our contract, or it'll even impact who we can write a contract to. We may have to look for companies that do business in that country that has magnesium. If they don't, then we can't do that. You're also going to list specific factors of the acquisition, as much as you know. Geographic location, that can impact which vendors are available. Required certifications, especially as we're dealing with the more high-tech security things that we tend to deal with. Certifications may be really a stopper for a lot of companies, so we need to be able to list what those are. And perhaps there's some unique government requirements that need to be identified. Put those down on your market research as well. And finally, we've already kind of talked about this. Identify in the marketplace how the item is typically contracted. And that may not just be for your particular acquisition, but you're going to go out and look and just do a little search and find out who else in the government has purchased whatever you're looking for. Something simple as mowing services tend to be very localized, so that may shrink what you're doing. But gosh, we have other government agencies here in town who may be doing mowing services or receiving mowing services, and so you can find out who they're working with. So you want to put that down. All right, so let's talk about just some real quick tricks of the trade then, and then we'll kind of wrap this short little session up. I'm calling this tips and tricks. List at least one firm that you know can do the job. You've got to do that. And I have seen market research papers come in where they don't have any people who can do the job. Well, then we're going to have a really difficult time securing that service for you or that product for you. Tip number 2 is attach all documentation to the market research. So if you've gone out on a website and you've done your little Google search and you found out, boy, there's this list of 12 firms that appear to be able to do that, do a screenshot of that, attach it to your market research. It just helps you understand, it helps the reader understand the type of and the breadth of research that you've done to move this thing forward. Tip number 3 is make sure your conclusion is supported by what is found above. Don't get to the end and say, I think we should go with small business, and you've used none of the space up above to talk about what you found in small businesses. No, there's actually 50 small businesses, 20 small businesses. That supports your conclusion, but make sure there's support up there how you got there. Okay? Attach all references and requirements. As we go into these things, we'll find in our PWSs, our performance work statements, that there's actual requirements sitting there. And those requirements, the contractor needs to know, and it does help us define exactly who needs to be asked to participate in the buy. And finally, be current. Be current. again, going back to my horse-drawn carriage example of moving cannons around in 1890, we wouldn't use that market research before World War I. It would have to be updated. Market research from the past is great, but go ahead and make sure you freshen it up so that it's always current. I know we've said about 1.5 years is typically the time that you want to make sure that your market research is within, but I would even say with a changing environment and based on what you're actually buying, 6 months may be too long. So make sure that your market research is fresh. All right, we're going to wrap this up then with a conclusion, and the conclusion simply, let me give you the word. You've lasted this long, it's rule. Rule, R-U-L-E. So there you go. So you send me those 3 words, I'll know you've listened to me talk for 30 minutes and we're in good shape. All right, conclusion. Be expansive on your market research. 1, 2-word sentences does not really cut it. Give us all the information that you need, that we need to make a decision, right? Be expansive. Tell us what you have found. We're not doing the market research, at least initially. We're getting it from you. So tell us how you got there. What did you find? There were 12 firms that were able to provide body armor, but only 6 of them have the special certification required by the government. And of those, only 3 had the pattern that the Air Force uses for security forces troops. That's great market research. Now we know where we're going. Now we've narrowed it down a little bit. Also, be sure to attach everything to your market research. You'll have that form that's given to you by your contracting officer, but make sure you attach attachments to it. Show how you've gotten where you've gotten. Big conclusion, obviously, is to use the internet. Type in what you're looking for. You'll be amazed at what comes up. You can do a great comprehensive internet search using the internet, and that's perfectly acceptable. Just be sure to cite where you're getting your information as you do that. Cite the website, and it'll pay off because you'll go back in at some later time and perhaps want to do that market research again, and now you have the breadcrumbs to get back there. And the final tip I have for you under conclusions is make a case. This is, you're building a case to go a certain direction based on your market research. Make the case. Will it hold up in court? And that's really, it doesn't have to go to court, and it probably won't go to court, but just make sure that you are making an argument that makes sense. Why we should go to this type of firm. Perhaps in the snakes code, perhaps in a small business set aside. Why should we? Or why should we go large? Make the case. Ask yourself, if I was to read this as an independent person, would they come to the same conclusion? If the answer is no, go up and beef up your market research. If the answer is yes, you've done your job. We're ready to move that next step where we get all the rest of the requirements done. Well, that concludes it for me. I've gone a few minutes over, but hopefully this was helpful as we just kind of talked through some real high-level market research things. It's super important. It's super important. And you as a Corps, as these requirements come up, you make it happen because you're the ones who know what you need. You can make that determination. So thank you for listening. This is Todd Bales, QAPC for AMIC DET2, and I look forward to seeing you next time.